Hey, what's up guys? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Today's video we're going to talk about mixing rhythms and leads together. So the main points I want to get across is that you really have to differentiate between layer 1 and layer 2. I talk about this all the time. Layer 1 is where you just pay attention to the key. Alright, so there's a chord progression happening, whether you're playing the chord progression and the leads all at the same time by yourself, there's still a chord progression happening. If you just focus on the key and you don't really pay attention to each specific chord change, that's layer 1. Layer 2 is where you actually focus on the chord changes. So within each of the two layers, you have the option to produce a more bluesy type of sound or a more melodic type of sound. And of course, you can mix the two together if you want. So we're going to talk about all of that stuff from a layer 1 perspective and from a layer 2 perspective. And then at the end, we're going to get into the rhythm, the actual rhythm component of all of this. So the absolute very first thing that you always do is look at the chord progression. So if you're making up the chord progression, then look at the chords you're playing. If you're trying to analyze a song or something like that, look at the chord progression. That's always the first step. That's going to allow you to determine what your layer 1 and what your layer 2 are. So the chords that we're using here in this video are a D minor chord, to a B flat major chord, to an A major, or you can play an A dominant 7 if you want to play this chord in its 7th form. Alright, so let's talk about layer 1. So layer 1 is where you just pay attention to the key. So when you're mixing the rhythms and the leads together like we're doing here in this video, you kind of can't help but to also pay attention to the chords. Like, you have to pay attention to the chords too because you're actually playing the chords. But if you're jamming along with a backing track that's in the key of D minor, if you just know we're in the key of D minor, that's the only information you need to apply layer 1 concepts. You know the overall key, you don't care about each specific chord. That is layer 1. All right, so let's map out the D natural minor scale across the entire neck of the guitar. So from a layer 1 perspective, if the goal is to sound more melodic, I'm going to utilize all of these notes. There's only 7 notes here that you see. I'm just going to utilize all of them. That doesn't mean I have to play up and down the entire fretboard. It just means that no matter which position I find myself playing in, I'm going to utilize all 7 notes of this D natural minor scale, the key scale. This is your layer 1. So you play a D minor chord. You want to do some fills. Let's say I want to jump up here. This is your pentatonic position number 1 area. So I'll play a D chord or a D minor chord. Then when I get to the B flat major chord, again, you're going to utilize your full 7-note scale. Then when you get to this chord, again, you're going to utilize your full 7-note scale. So the scale remains constant. Your layer 1 remains constant the entire time. Even though the chords are changing, the layer 1 remains constant. So a D minor chord, B flat major chord, A chord. So the chords change, but the scale remains constant. Layer 1 remains constant, assuming that you're remaining in the same key. All right, so if your goal is to sound more melodic, then you're going to utilize the full 7-note key scale. That is called the diatonic scale. So we're in the key of D minor. What you just saw spanned up and down the neck of the guitar was known as the D natural minor scale. Those are the same 7 notes as the F major scale, because F major and D minor is a relative major-minor pair. I just like to call it the diatonic scale. It's a lot easier. We're in this key. We're in one of the 12 possible keys here. We're in the key of F major, D minor, whatever you want to call it. There's no F major present, so it's the key of D minor. You have your 7 notes for the key scale. If you utilize all 7 of those notes, the result is going to be a melodic sound. If you want to sound more bluesy, then instead of playing all 7 notes, stick to just the 5 pentatonic notes of the D minor pentatonic scale. You can even get more bluesy by going and adding in what is known as the blue note. All right, so let's look at that. So just the yellow notes are going to be your pentatonic notes. Here's your pentatonic position number 1 for this key. Here's your pentatonic position 2. And then you can move up and down the fretboard utilizing all 5 of the pentatonic positions. You can even make things sound more bluesy by going and adding in the blue note to each of the pentatonic positions as well. So utilizing just the pentatonic scale and adding in that blue note, you're going to get more of a bluesy sound. So again, layer 1 remained constant over all 3 chords. The scale stayed the same as the chords changed. So layer 2 is where you actually pay attention to the chords that you are soloing over. So in this video, we're playing both the rhythm and the lead parts, so you kind of already know what chords you're soloing over. But let's say that you're jamming along with a backing track that's in the key of D minor. And that's all the information that you have. You don't know what the actual chords are in the backing track, you just know that backing track is in the key of D minor. That's all the information that you need to apply the layer 1 concepts. Layer 2 is where we're like, okay, what are the actual chords I'm soloing over? Oh, it's a D minor chord to a B flat major chord to an A major chord. Cool, got it. It's going to change the notes of focus within the scale. So different notes are going to sound better over certain chords. It's all going to work. All of the notes are going to work, but some notes are going to sound better than other notes on a per chord basis. Therefore, it makes sense to pay attention to the actual chords that you're soloing over. So let's say that we're on the D minor chord. So here's your D minor chord. I'm utilizing my full 7-note diatonic scale. Oop, I just grabbed a D minor chord up there because I'm on the D minor chord. I didn't feel like jumping all the way back down to there, so I just played a D minor chord here. This is coming from this basic minor bar chord shape. I just played the high 4 strings. All right, and then I'm kind of noodling around. There's a little D minor chord shape there. And then I want to kind of And then the cool thing about this key is I can even utilize the open D string. You know, if you're playing in a key where, you know, one of the open strings is the root of the key that you're playing in, take advantage of that. So all right, so you can always use the open D string just because, you know, coincidentally we're in the key of D minor, so that helps us out. Then when you want to go and move to the next chord, we don't really have a B flat string, so you can't really use that little shortcut, but still the scale is going to remain the same. But now we're playing over this chord. There's a little piece of a B flat chord that's coming from the C shape. You might want to play a B flat chord up here. Might want to play a B flat chord down here. You can play B flat chords anywhere, but as you're noodling around, now you have some notes of focus. And then when we get to the last chord, let's actually make this an A minor chord now instead of an A major chord, because A minor would be the diatonic chord, the actual chord that's found in this key before making any type of manipulations to it. So let's just make this an A minor chord. So you can find A minor chord shapes all over the place. You have an A minor chord shape here. I like this A minor chord shape here. I like playing this A minor arpeggio like this. A minor chord shape here. A minor chord shape here. You You could also use the open A string to kind of keep the rhythm over the A. All right, so but now I have my notes of focus over that chord. All right, so right there I was sticking to just the in-key chords, D minor chord, B flat major chord, A minor chord, all part of the key. So sticking to just the diatonic chords, that's going to result in a more melodic type of sound. Now, if you want to make things sound more bluesy from a layer 2 perspective, then you pretty much can't go wrong with just making everything into dominant 7th chords. Like, if you have a chord progression and you want to blues it up, just make them into dominant 7th chords. I actually did a lesson a few years ago about how the Doors, I did a song analysis on the, I forget which Doors song it was, but it was all in the key of E minor, but instead of playing the actual chords from the key of E minor, major chords and minor chords, they just played all dominant 7th chords, and it sounded cool, it sounded bluesy. So, you know, if you want to take this chord progression and take it from the diatonic D minor to B flat major to A minor, just make them all dominant 7. Or you can keep the first chord as a minor chord, but play it in its 7th form, which would be a minor 7th chord, and then make this a dominant 7th chord, and then make this into a dominant 7th chord. All right, so that's not going to change your layer 1 stuff. You're still in the key of D minor. You're just manipulating the chords. So you can make a manipulation to one of the chords. You can make a manipulation to all of the chords. You can sometimes make a manipulation to one of the chords and sometimes not. The thing to remember is that this chord progression is just remaining constant. And as you're noodling around, all right, so your layer 1, that remains constant. That is dictated by knowing the key. Your layer 2, if you're playing the rhythm chord yourself and you want to kind of sound more melodic, stick to mostly the diatonic chords. If you want to sound more bluesy, or on the side of, you know, dominant 7th chords. But yeah, that's basically the trick. Big point here. Focus on layer 1 independently of layer 2, because you kind of have to practice the two things separately, and then you can kind of put it all together. It's just like playing the piano. You want to practice your left hand independently of the right hand, and then you want to kind of put it all together. The same thing applies here. Layer 1, layer 2, put it all together after practicing them both independently. So the final thing I want to talk about in this video is the rhythm. So you can play any rhythm that you want, you can play any strumming patterns that you want, but the important thing to pay attention to is how the chords fit into the bars. So a bar is just the count. So in 4/4 timing, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a bar. So the demo that I played in the beginning, that was a total of 16 bars. The D minor chord lasted for a total of 8 bars. Then we moved to the B flat major chord, which lasted for a total of 4 bars. We then moved back to the D minor chord, which lasted for a total of 3 bars. And then we went to the A chord, which lasted for 1 bar, totaling 16 bars. Why that's important? Because you can fit as much stuff, as much fills, as much as you possibly want. But when it comes time to change chords, make sure that you know when to do so. That's a lot of time to jam over the D minor chord. That's a lot of time to be just grabbing a D dominant 7th chord if you're trying to add a bluesy effect. That's a lot of time to be running up and down your scales. You could very easily get lost and not make the chord change when it's time to make the chord change. But if the goal is to play rhythm and lead and kind of keep things going, you want to kind of keep track of that in your head. So 1, 2, 3, 4. switch to that A7 right at the very last bar. When the backing track is doing all of this for you, you don't have to worry about this stuff. The backing track, the chords are lasting how long they're supposed to last for. You're just intuitively following along. You can feel when the chord changes are occurring. But when you're doing all this stuff yourself, you're supposed to be holding down the rhythm and adding these fills all together. You have to be aware where the chord changes occur. So it's just a matter of keeping track of how many bars each chord lasts for. So if it's a 12-bar blues, or if it's a 16-bar chord progression, or if it's an 8-bar chord progression, whatever the chord progression happens to be, just make sure you know where those chord changes occur and incorporate that into your playing. So that's going to do it for this video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. See you next time.